when you're an entrepreneur, you get to bet on yourself, and you're not betting on the company, right? If you're working at IBM or Salesforce and tens of thousands of employees, you're just working in the infrastructure and you're helping them try to move the big picture needle. For entrepreneurship, so collaborations, launching this, doing that, new SKU product launch, expansion into these territories. No one is to tell us yes and no, and we have full control and full navigational, ability to kind of figure out how we want to continue to move this thing forward. And for me, the bottom line again is the ability to bet on yourself is something that I would do over and over and over and over again before going to work for a corporate company at this point in my life.
When you were in college, you actually got suspended for something related to cannabis. And now you're the co-founder and president of a bustling cannabis business that's actually in over 750 doors. You guys are in 6 states. You're growing like crazy. You're acquiring other companies. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe the irony there and what happened when you were back in Boulder?
Yeah, it's pretty ironic to say that actually. I've been passionate about the plant since high school days, to be honest. I was prescribed on Adderall at age 7, at way too early of an age, and started to self-medicate on cannabis in high school. When I learned about Boulder and the University of Colorado, when I went and toured it, and the reputation that it had, I had a affinity towards it and was excited to kind of try to figure out a way to get to Boulder. And so at Boulder, I definitely indulged in some cannabis products. Cannabis also went legal while we were in school at Boulder together, Abe, as you remember. And unfortunately, I did get into some trouble in Boulder, and I did get suspended for a semester from the University of Colorado for cannabis. A couple of miscommunications, you can say the least, and I ended up getting suspended my junior year for a semester. So yeah, full circle to end up back in Colorado to start a cannabis brand years later with my brother, Jake, and it is a pretty funny story to think back on.
I feel like that's kind of like when the teacher's like, you're never going to be anything. And then that student goes on and they like become an A-list Hollywood celebrity, or they start some big business, and then they go back and they're kind of like, look at me now. I mean, not only did you go on to start multiple businesses, but the fact that Binske, actual product, you guys have a lot of grow in Colorado, which is the same place where you're getting suspended from school. Did you ever think when you were younger, when you were growing up, when you were, prescribed Adderall, but you're medicating with marijuana, that you would live in a world where you could do something like you're doing right now? I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, I never did actually think about it. Just in terms of timeline, Boulder won number 1 party school in like 2005, 2006 when we were in high school. So I was excited to take my talents to Colorado. And then while in Colorado went legal. And that was when, I don't know if you remember, but I became a med patient while I think sophomore or junior year in Boulder. So I was 19, 20 years old, and I became a Colorado medical patient. And I went and shopped at this one store in particular down on like Pearl Street area. That's actually owned by a good friend of mine in the industry now, and just full circled for legalization to occur while we were in Colorado, and then to end up back in Colorado, like you said, building out our grow. Funny enough, Abe, our grow is actually in Steamboat Springs, as you know, and Steamboat is...
I know, in Oak Creek.
Exactly, Oak Creek. You're basically your hometown. So to be back in Steamboat building out a grow years later is pretty wild.
But you already had like an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, in Boulder, you're studying engineering, which is challenging in and of itself, right? That's a highly demanding pursuit. And at the same time that you're doing that, you launch Where the Party, which maybe you want to explain a little bit to people that don't know what Where the Party was, how that came about. I mean, that's really kind of where you got your feet wet in starting a business, running a business, seeing how everything works from the top all the way down to the bottom. So how did that come up, and what was it like getting that off the ground?
Yeah, wow, blast from the past, Where the Party days. Haven't really gone into this one in a minute, but We were in college also sophomore year and came across a glow in the dark ink. It was similar to the sun and the moon and the stars that kids stick onto their ceiling at night that stays illuminated when the lights go off. It was a very similar ink to that we started to screen print onto clothing, and so it was light reactive apparel. It was it's a wearable technology that we built into a clothing line, and every single item would come with an LED light, and you could actually communicate on the clothing. So, phone numbers, smiley faces, tic tac toe. We ended up making shirts for, I believe, 42 music festivals over the next 4 years. Shirts for
Yeah.
Coachella and South by Southwest and Ultra in Miami and Camp Bisco and just literally a long EDC, Marquee, Las Vegas, just a laundry list um, of events, artists, and during that time that EDM scene was starting to take off, and we with a couple partners built a brand in the clothing line and the lifestyle wearable tech space that played into that arena. The Wear the Party company that was launched in Colorado kind of gave me the first understanding of how to run a business and how to operate a startup in the entrepreneurial spirits at that point. So Where the Party was about a 3.5, 4 year project. I ended up moving out to Los Angeles after school to try to continue getting Where the Party up and running. Really funny story is I made it to a sixth round Shark Tank audition for Where the Party, and I had a film date
So,
lined up. I had a producer that was working with me on my 1 minute pitch, and you know how they come out and they do their, hey, I'm Alex, and here's my company, Where the Party, and
yep.
so I was working on my pitch. I had a film date. I was ready to go and fly to LA because I at this moment wasn't actually in LA, and right before this happened, the whole episode fizzled, and that was kind of where I decided to hang it up. And it was a fun run, but it was more than anything a learning lesson in business as a whole.
How did, when I think back to that time that you were growing that, I mean, obviously it's an interesting idea to like go all in on, and it's your idea, your and your partner's idea. But that was also at a time where, I mean, this is going to sound insane to even say, but social media didn't exist yet. You know, like we weren't on Instagram in college. There wasn't, not every single brand had a social footprint. So, what did you learn about marketing a product and a brand in an age when you didn't have the same mediums that we have available now, the same ability to partner with people that have influence and reach and engagement? Like, how did you get it to that level where you're doing entire shows and concerts and trying to get into NBA games and stuff like that?
It is funny that you say that because now looking back, I think we would have tried to get a viral TikTok video to show the technology and let it be
Right.
shown to the masses, and we didn't have that ability. It was really just grinding, pounding the pavement. I started off hitting up sororities and fraternities on campus at Boulder, trying to get their upcoming T-shirt to be a glow-in-the-dark T-shirt. And from there, started to go into music festivals. And from there, I had a deal in place with the Golden State Warriors to do one T-shirt on every single seat inside the entire arena for an upcoming playoff game. So I just started to
Right.
kind of build and build and build. At the end of the day, I wasn't a screen printer. I wasn't manufacturing these garments. I was middlemaning these garments. And so it was kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, of trying to figure out the best way to kind of middleman these deals and broker them at the same time building a brand. So literally street level guerrilla kind of style, grueling and time consuming, and ended up kind of traveling around for 2 years, going to as many music festivals as possible. So it's
It's
yeah,
exhausting.
it's exhausting.
So how did you know? I mean, I feel like in many people's entrepreneurial careers or any career in that regard, the decision to hang it up or to walk away from something is tough. And it can be tough if it's athletics, if it's anything that you grew with your own efforts and inputs. What was it about that, despite the successes that you were seeing, that you knew it was time to walk away? Because it wasn't, I know that it wasn't, you walked away directly for Binske, and you couldn't foresee yet the successes that Binske would achieve. So to walk away from something you'd put so much energy, like you said it was 4 years. How do you make that decision as a business leader, as the person who's running the income for your own life? And what goes into that decision-making process for you?
Yeah. they say that all entrepreneurs in general claim that they're just one deal away from making it big. And in my head for multiple years, I was like, if I could get this Warriors deal done, if I could get the Shark Tank, I literally for years thought that I was just one big deal away from Where the Party becoming a global glow in the dark clothing brand, which is even funny to say out loud right now. But um, I suffered from kind of being, too ingrained in the business where I literally started to believe it so much. And I obviously wouldn't have done it for that many years if I didn't believe in it. But there comes a point where you look at where you have this vision of where you want your life to go, and then you have the trajectory that you're on. And sometimes if that trajectory doesn't seem to align with where you want to be, you start to get a little anxious and stressed. And so I started to realize that the lifestyle that I want to have one day for my family and provide for my kids and such was not necessarily the trajectory that I was on with selling glow shirts and building Wear the Party. And it was a
Right.
more of a niche product, to your point, very niche product. I also, really interesting that you bring this up because I just thought of this actually. Towards the end of Wear the Party, I stopped wearing the clothes of Wear the Party. And for me to be pushing
Wild.
something and no longer be an ambassador and no longer me being really stoked on wearing it on a daily basis was kind of the other, turning point of the whole thing of what am I doing here and how do I get this done? I don't mean to make it sound like because I'm in cannabis now that I need to smoke weed all day every day, or if you're in alcohol that you're getting drunk all day. So it's not like you need to always
Right.
be the a 24/7 ambassador for the industry or the brand that you're in. At the same time, I started to just realize how niche it is. And since then, that concept has been knocked off by a couple other people. I saw a company recently pop up out of the UK. And so there is legs to it. It is an interesting concept, but I've decided to kind of move into something that's a little less niche and something that I think makes more sense. But yeah, you're right. I didn't go directly to Binske. I ended up moving back to Miami. I got into medical sales for a couple years in Miami, and that was
Yeah.
the bridge between Where the Party and Binske.
Was that like I mean, that moment where you just poured, years of your life into growing something, as you admitted to, you're kind of always expecting that the next deal is going to be the deal that really takes up, blows this thing out of the water and puts you in that position to have this lifestyle that you want. When you're in that limbo, like you don't want to be doing, you just came out of creating this amazing thing and now you're in medical sales, doing MRI sales. Like, where is that one of those moments where you're kind of going, what the fuck am I doing with my life? What do I do? I need to go back to school? Do I need to get further my degree? How was it being in that post, like walking away from your business pre Binske really coming into play? Like, what was that space like for
Yeah,
you?
so I was about 24, 25 years old, still living in Venice Beach right after college. And at this moment, I was starting to realize that Where the Party was on its way out. My dad and my stepmom were giving me the old, hey, like FYI, you have an engineering degree from a great university. Why don't you maybe consider going to
Right.
be a engineer? And I was like, well, that would make too much sense.
While working at like a hostel
Right. Venice Beach
too.
Hostel, the other room on Abbot Kinney, SAT tutor. Don't forget, I had a variety of odd jobs to try to make ends meet during those times living in Venice. I was a broke 22, 23-year-old trying to figure it out like the best of us. But yeah, I think to your point, it was something that my parents did this degree. We spent a ton of money and you spent a ton of time on this. Like, what are we doing here? And so I actually, believe it or not, took an engineering job in Miami and I moved back from LA to Miami for an engineering job. It was a civil engineering job where I was working on concrete restoration and helping bridge building and such. And I
Sick.
lasted about 14 days, I would say 2 to 3 weeks until I said to my
Yeah.
dad, yo, I'm out. And he's like, what do you mean you're out? You just moved cross country. You got to give this at least, a significant amount of time. I ended up pivoting over to medical sales, and that was really the beginning of my sales career in the sense of just managing clients, CRMs, how to build accounts, how to go from prospect to lead to customer, and realizing that just all of sales is relationship based. And so I really don't think it
Yes.
matters if it's insurance sales, cannabis sales, MRI sales. It's really just who you know and building the network. And so I, I think that's one of my best skill sets at this point is being a master schmoozer, a big networker, and understanding how to do it from doctors and attorneys in Miami to then pivot over to cannabis. And, you know, my first real position with Binske was director of sales. I was knocking on dispensary doors at the beginning, selling chocolate bars, built through going to these conferences and networking and meeting people, shaking hands and schmoozing. So that was a big kind of that was a big
Well,
part of it all.
that's such a valuable part because I feel like, especially nowadays, I talk about this all the time on the podcast with different people at different points in their careers, but it's so common that people always want the end result. Like they want their body to look the way that it does after years of training. They want their business to be making millions of dollars. They want their product to be in every single store. And if that's what you're always focused on, you miss this really valuable part where like you get boots on the ground, you get your own sleeves rolled up. And if you look at your position now as co-founder and president of this growing company that's doing incredibly well, and yet you were working at a hostel and then you were in medical sales and you were, you know, you're doing all these things that you can only connect the dots looking backwards. But with each of those experiences, each of those companies that you were a part of, the sales relationship building skills that you learned in med sales, those are all things that contribute to your success in your current position. So if you're someone who wants to grow a business into a multi-million-dollar business, there's so much value in the in-between, in the being the broke 24-year-old, 22-year-old living in Venice, you know, splitting rent and room with someone else just to make ends meet, because you can't teach that part of it to anyone who comes into the business.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, Abe, when you have your back against the wall, it makes you really figure some shit out. And I got cut off by the parents after college, and
Yeah.
I truly had my back against the wall. I had to go figure out a way to make ends meet. I was starting to make good cash in Miami on the medical sales side, and I had a decision to make. Do I go to Colorado, partner with my brother, and go launch a cannabis brand? That is a very risky opportunity. At that time, also, there was only 2 states that were becoming legal, right? This wasn't a thing like it is now. And as a reference now, there's 33 medical states, 19 recreational states. The risk factor of the cannabis industry is no longer there. So when you meet people now that are in the cannabis industry,
Right.
most of them have joined over the last couple of years where there wasn't much of a risk factor. 2014, 2015, when these conversations were being had, there was a massive risk factor going on. And so um, deciding to leave medical sales, which in my opinion was a pretty good position with a great, you know, salary and good inflow of cash, the decision was, do I want to go bet on myself again? Do I want to go bet on a, you know,
Right.
instead of working for the man and for the bigger company itself, and put my head down and grind and potentially have something that is substantial at the end of the day? And I do believe that my work ethic and um, the way that I started to build my sales acumen, my business acumen, I decided I want to go bet on myself. And I'll never forget this, but my brother moved out to Colorado before I did, and he was out there and basically was getting everything in motion to launch a cannabis brand. And so he was buying a piece of land and getting some infrastructure together and getting licenses together. And he basically called me and said, you know, where are you at? How do I get you to come out here? And I told him that, you know, man, I'm good. I went to Boulder already. I've spent my tokens in Colorado. I'm good on moving back to Colorado, and I wish you the best. I'm making good money in medical sales, and I'm good. And shortly thereafter, I think like a day or two later, he called me back and was like, "What's your tipping point? What is your number, and how do we make this work?" And I
Yeah.
think I just
And that's your own brother,
it's my own blood brother, exactly.
right?
And I threw a number out of thin air and kind of said, you know, if I was going to do it, this is what I would like to do in terms of a partnership. And he basically said, "Done, let's go," via text. And I then
Yeah.
looked at myself in the mirror and said, "Oh shit, guess I'm moving back to Colorado." So sold everything I owned at that point in Miami, quit the job in medical sales, and moved out to Colorado. Partnered with my brother late 2015, early 2016. And at that point, we had what our plan was. We had no idea
Right.
the exact path that we were going to take, but we knew that we were both passionate about the plant since high school days, and to end up being two stoner brothers that actually got off the couch and went to go get into the industry, and just instead of just sitting on the couch and watching the industry come through, is something that I look back and just it was the best decision of both of our lives to go into that endeavor.
Well, and that shows in your business and in your product. I mean, Binske is very clearly a quality first brand. Like, you guys are obviously knowledgeable on the individual level, both you and Jake, as well as I'm sure all your employees. But it comes through in not only just the product itself, the quality, the branding, the design, the professional, like nothing is skipped. And I feel like you said, you're passionate about the plant for eons, right? For as long as you can remember. That kind of stuff shows through because it's who you guys are at your core, right? So even without the business, that's how you would think about the plant. That's how you would talk about it with friends. That's what you would look for. And whatever the business is, when that's how you are about something before it exists, it's only natural that you become that way when the products are realized. When you think back to that time that you left and you actually said, okay, I'm out, I'm going with Jake, I'm going to take this offer, even though it's my brother and it's in Colorado, yada, yada. What is it about that entrepreneurial spirit that draws you in? Because a lot of people, and I don't even mean this to dog on people, there are people very happy in a structured career where they work for someone else. And that's invaluable positions within every business. All businesses need happy employees that are doing their job. Some people just aren't drawn to that. It's like a resistance. What is it about being an entrepreneur versus the clear path of executing, taking all the skill sets, all the things that you have, your work ethic, your drive, your consistency, and deciding not to do that under someone else's roof? Why are you pulled to do that for yourself?
I think when you're an entrepreneur, you get a bet on yourself, and you're not betting on the company, right? If you're working at IBM or Salesforce and tens of thousands of employees, you're just working in the infrastructure and you're helping them try to move the big picture needle. For entrepreneurship, and so collaborations, launching this, doing that, new SKU product launch, expansion into these territories, no one is to tell us yes and no, and we have full control and full navigational ability to kind of figure out how we want to continue to move this thing forward. And for me, the bottom line again is the ability to bet on yourself is something that I would do over and over and over and over again before going to work for a corporate company at this point in my life. And I do agree with you. A lot of people would say it's too risky and I'd rather get a steady paycheck and not have to deal with it. But I am not one of those. I'm a risk taker, and I'd rather have more upside, high risk, high upside, and bet on myself.
Yeah, and I think one cool thing that's interesting, having the art behind you, is there is an artistic element to this. Like, you get to be a business builder, an entrepreneur, impact the lives of multiple people that work for you as the company grows and do all this stuff. But then you also get to throw this artistic spin on it of who you are. And if you look at the partnerships, for example, that you guys are doing with Intelligentsia and Keep, that's an expression of who you are, right? How cool is that you get to choose to collaborate on things that already mean something in your life? So, I mean, maybe you can even talk a little bit about that. With Intelligentsia is a staple coffee roaster in Venice, right? And it's somewhere that we've spent hundreds of hours. How did that partnership come about, and what does it mean to you to be able to align yourself with brands that you are already such a fan of with what you've now grown into this company?
The bottom line is it's an absolute dream come true. For the cannabis people that are listening to this, I think most people would agree that cannabis and coffee go really well together. Just a quick example is...
And have for decades. Right? Amsterdam.
Yeah, exactly. If you think about it, sometimes you get like a little too stony and you want to kind of snap out of it and you take a shot of espresso, or sometimes you feel like a little tweaky off cold brew and you want to take a hit of a J, and they actually have a perfect balance if you can get the right balance between the two that gets you a really well balanced kind of, energetic, euphoric high with a little bit of coffee and a little bit of cannabis mixed. And so we have a pretty robust edible line, and we have a good chocolate story, a backstory with cacao that comes from Peru and all these different flavors of chocolate. And I really was interested in launching a coffee flavored chocolate bar, an espresso flavored chocolate bar. And raw ingredients for us is something that has been a big point of what we've done to build the reputation that we have of best edible brand from Leafly the first year that we launched in 2017. And so sourcing raw ingredients that are high quality ingredients, artisanal craft ingredients, has been something that's a backbone of the business. And so Intelligentsia is literally my number one favorite coffee roaster. And back to your previous question of being a trailblazer in an industry that's never been done before in its infancy stages, I live every day of why not? Who's to tell me no? Why not go for it? And so I literally hit up a gentleman by the name of Kevin off of LinkedIn, Intelligentsia. By the way, even though they have a huge presence in Venice, they're actually headquarters in Chicago, Illinois. They have
I had no idea.
They're an Illinois-based coffee roaster, and they have distribution in over 1,000 roasters across the country. They have brick and mortar across the country, including Melrose and Abbot Kinney and all over Los Angeles. But I basically reached out to...
Here I am thinking it was like a Venice local hotspot.
I think everyone thinks
even living there for a decade.
I think everyone thinks that because of their presence out here. But I ended up reaching out to a gentleman off LinkedIn named Kevin, and I just kind of said, hey, man, I'm Alex from Binske. I would love to talk to you a little bit. And he introduced me to his boss, and his boss climbed the ladder a little bit. The next thing you know, I was on a Zoom call with the CEO of Intelligentsia, pitching him on this idea of the perfect combination of cannabis and coffee, and telling him exactly what I just told you a minute ago. And it was a couple other people on the call. And when I used the analogy of, when you're a little shaky in the morning and you need a hit of a J to balance you out, the call just went crickets. It was dead silent. And I could tell that they were maybe not the biggest everyday cannabis consumers like maybe I am. And it was really funny, but we ended up getting a deal signed, and we now have Binske brand. We're looking to expand that relationship. We'll be launching additional SKUs with them on the THC side and hopefully on the hemp side as well. And then we can get to this in a minute, but we're opening a store in Miami, and that store will have an Intelligentsia kind of barista station cafe within the store. So I share this.
What does it mean to you when you align with a brand like Intelligentsia? The brand, like, I feel like that's one of those moments that kind of tells you a lot about what you're doing. You know what you're doing because you're running a business and you're growing this thing into this huge juggernaut. But when someone says yes on a partnership like that, what does that tell you about your brand?
It's the ultimate third-party validation is what it is. When you're grinding every day and you're stuck in the trenches, it's hard for you to have the visibility from the outside of how you're perceived. And so you don't always know how is this brand compared to other cannabis brands, or are we was exactly that. It was validation of the reality of the situation of being one of the larger cannabis brands with one of the larger footprints in the industry, with the states in dispensary count that you mentioned earlier of 6 states have a bigger reach than us. And so it's a compelling opportunity for a group like Intelligentsia, and for them to say, we believe in you guys and what you've built and the brand that you've built, the art, the raw ingredients, the packaging, the team that you have, the leadership team, the C-suite. It is the ultimate reassurance of we must be on the right track here.
It is fascinating when you consider how again, I draw the comparison to the artwork behind you. It's the intricacy of your brand that on the front side, it's like, it's just a weed brand, but it's not. And then if you look further into that, it's how intricate every decision that you guys make actually is. and then how those intricate decisions contribute to the quality of a product. Because in a world where you're trying to differentiate yourself between all the other million brands that someone's going to see when they walk into a dispensary or like a MedMen or something like that, being able to bank your existence on quality and doing things like using raw ingredients, something that is very easy to overlook and might be not cost effective for a company that's starting up. Those kind of decisions become so integral. And when I think to coffee shops are a great example, because you can go into a coffee shop and you instantly know if it's your vibe or not, from the extent that they've gone to get the decoration right, the design of the furniture, the cups that they use, which espresso machine that they have. All that kind of stuff matters so much when a consumer is making a decision and they're not even aware of it. You're not even really aware of how many things you're processing when you're choosing what coffee shop to go to, what medical marijuana product to purchase when you're in a dispensary. How did you guys decide that that was going to be such an important part of growing this brand instead of trying to cut corners and go that way?
Yeah, so because cannabis is in its infancy stages, when people walk into the store, the newest metric that I've heard is 76% of customers walking into a dispensary are undecisive of what they're going to buy at that moment. If you think about that stat one more time, 76% of the people walking into a cannabis shop don't know what they're going to buy upon walking in. And so the whole thing is the bud tenders, right? And how do the products look on the shelf? And so let me give you an alcohol comparison here. I've gotten into mezcal over the last couple of years, like you have as well. And for mezcal, trendy, very right on brand here. So for mezcal, we weren't drinking mezcal in college, right? We were not drinking mezcal in high school. I didn't have brand affinity and a brand that I liked on the mezcal side of things. So over the last couple of years, when I go into a liquor store, you bet your ass that the brand that looks the prettiest, the nicest looking bottle is usually who I'm going to lean towards. And so we felt the same kind of idea here with in this infancy stages when people don't know, in the bud tenders, which for people that are not familiar, bud tenders is the word for the employees inside the cannabis shops that are selling the products. Instead of just relying on the bud tenders to like us and to move our products on our packaging alone, I do feel like we have probably, if not the best, some of the best packaging in the industry, by far some of the sexiest. And then the best part is that we're not disguising poor product with beautiful packaging. We know that our product is a home run product. And so for us to get a long lasting customer of ours. And so it's a multi-prong approach to build this brand, from packaging, raw ingredients, quality of the cannabis oil, customer service, and everything all together. But I really do think, going back to that liquor thing, you're not going to go into a liquor store and say to the clerk, hey, which vodka should I buy? You've been forming your own opinion for many years, and that decision is not for the clerk anymore. But mezcal is just really interesting to consider because it's a newer thing and you don't really know. And so you're asking the clerk, or you're making a judgment based on appearance of the bottle. And so that was something that when we launched, we wanted to make sure that we had some of the best packaging in the industry.
And you'd alluded to this, the opening of the Miami store, which we'll talk about in depth here in a moment. But why didn't you go the brick and mortar approach when you started this brand? Because that seems like a really simple way to control all the touch points, right? You own the business, you own the look of it, the feel of it. You're going to control the customer's experience when they come into the store. But Binske didn't choose to do that. Granted, I'm sure there's a lot of legal loopholes that you would have had to try to jump through to make that happen. But why is it that now, 5 years into this, 5.5 years into this, you're choosing to go the brick and mortar route and then expand a little bit on what that store is going to be like in Miami?
So the store that we're opening in Miami is not going to be a THC store. It's a lifestyle store, which I'll get to in a second. On the THC side, and why we didn't go into the dispensaries, there's about 800 dispensaries in California alone. There's about 700 in Colorado. You start to add all these other states, and there's probably 10,000 shops in the US alone right this second. So for us, getting into the retail side of things, we didn't think made a lot of sense. And Jake and I don't have a retail background, so we felt like this is a little bit out of our comfort zone here. What we decided to do was go into the brand play. And so what we've built is a brand. When you talk to people that say that they're in cannabis, the real question is, what do you do in cannabis? Are you a cultivator? Are you a producer? Are you a brand? Are you a retailer? There's an acronym MSO in the cannabis industry, which stands for multi-state operator. I describe us to be the first MSB. We're a multi-state brand. We got compared recently to the Casamigos of the cannabis industry. And that's kind of the idea here, is being a true brand that is replicated in all of these different markets. Looking at a company like Coca-Cola is so massive that they don't produce all of their own products anymore. They outsource production to some groups in some countries for them to produce their recipe on their behalf, delivering the same exact finished product, but they don't have to produce every single product in every single place. And so the end consumer, if you're in India or Indiana or London, it doesn't matter who produced that Coca-Cola. You just care that you're getting the same Coca-Cola, right? And so that is what we've done on the brand side of building out this MSB, is to replicate the exact same products inside of every single territory. The interesting thing about the Miami store, going back to that for a second, if you think about Supreme, and this I'm stealing from my brother because he loves this analogy, but I gotta steal it from him. If you think about Supreme starting off as a skateboard company, right? And you're a skateboarder, Abe, so you know this very well. If you then looked at last year's revenue of Supreme, what do you think their skateboard revenue was of their total global revenue last year?
I mean, maybe nothing, right? Like they're selling lifestyle to you, and they're selling the clothing, and skateboarding's the backdrop.
And they're doing collabs with BMW and Gucci and all these high-end luxury brands now. And so the evolution of Supreme going from a skateboard company to a true lifestyle brand is the evolution that we are trying to take Binske on right now. From right now, our revenue is tied to basically 100% THC. And we believe that Binske has what it takes to become a true lifestyle brand where THC is, we're not shying away from it, we're not leaving it, but it is a bucket, not the bucket. And so this Miami store for us will be the first real showing of us as a lifestyle brand. And so the store, I wish I could do some screen shares and show it to you, but
we can link it. We'll link it in like the YouTube and the show notes and everything. So if you have stuff that's visual, we can give that to the users. But go ahead, the audience.
The backbone of the store will be a clothing store, 1A. And then 1B, we're going to have the Intelligentsia barista station cafe inside of the store. We'll also do some swag and accessories and some hemp products. But the whole idea is we can move out of just being THC. And so L'Keep and Intelligentsia are two brands that both my brother and I have had a great affinity towards for almost 10 years, respectively, both. And so to have signed agreements and executed products with both companies, that is the backbone of this store. And that is something that we're really pumped on. And we will fill out the rest of the store with additional collaborations, which is what I'm working on right now.
So that's amazing. I mean, that essentially it puts a Binske heartbeat into Miami. It gives you guys a brick and mortar spot to start to share your lifeblood, right? Like, I mean, this becomes experiential. At this point, someone's walking into the store and they're hit with so much more of who you are than just the flower, right? Or the concentrate. Yep. Do you fear, though, that type of growth will diminish perceive you guys as people that are using the cannabis industry to catapult the launch of their lifestyle brand? And how do you like hedge your bets to not let that happen?
I think our goal is to become a lifestyle brand, and I think we're fully comfortable for people to know that. I think that is the end goal for us. Happens to be right now our number one territory by revenue and by volume. And so in South Beach, where this store is, and by the way, this store is inside of Dave Grutman's new hotel that he did with Pharrell. It's called the Good Time Hotel. And Dave Grutman is a shareholder in Praetorian, the parent company of ours. And he's been almost like a mentor to my brother recently. But basically, what I'm trying to get to is at the Lifestyle Binske store, our Binske products are sold at a True Leaf store a couple blocks away. So we're still trying to drive awareness to the fact that our THC products are available. We're just not legally selling them at this store. We're selling in the country. They're available. They're, I think, in like 11 or 13 states right now. But we are exclusive with True Leaf in Florida. And so Binske products are sold at all 117 doors of True Leaves in Florida. And the idea of this Miami showcase for the lifestyle is to drive more awareness to the brand's presence in Florida and continue to drive sales and increase patient count in Florida. So that's kind of
That's really
full circle
interesting
on it. Yeah.
because it seems there again, it's like this is a very crucial decision that you guys have made, right? Kind of like the quality of the products is you are actually choosing to elevate three brands, at least contract at this point. You're choosing to elevate three brands instead of doing what I think would be typical is to showcase your own brand within your store. And so if you think about the long-term effects of that, you're solidifying these relationships even deeper between Intelligentsia, L'Keep, True Leaf. You're all grateful to each other. That's an insanely smart thing to do when you think about how much potential. Again, it goes back to your brand, right? You know where you can take this. You know how big it can get. So you're not sweating the small stuff like making sure that Binske J's are sold at the counter in the Binske store. Instead, you're uplifting the experience. I like
Yeah, I
that.
think it's also letting everyone do what they're best at, right? Like for us to go build out a coffee
Yes.
program inside of our store when we don't know anything about coffee, why not bring in the leaders of the coffee industry in the US, what we believe to be intelligentsia? Why not bring in what Jake and I believe to be our favorite clothing brand in the world and have L'Keep clothes inside of our store instead of us going to print Binske logos on hats and t-shirts and doing merch like any other brand would do. We said we don't want merch. We want apparel. There's a huge difference between merch and apparel. Merch is slapping your logo on basic items.
Right.
Apparel, we created an original cut and sew garment line of our own favorite items with L'Keep. And so I think it allows.
How did you manage that partnership? Because that seems to me like a further stretch is to bring clothing and cannabis together. It's not like hemp cargo shorts for the guy going to the Grateful Dead show, right? This is a much different collaboration. Coffee on paper makes sense right away for the reasons that you alluded to earlier. So how did you choose to bring these two worlds together of L'Keep's fashion and your
I
products?
think for starters, going back to the Wear the Party days when I said I wasn't wearing the clothes at the end and it was driving me crazy, like Jake and I are just wanting to do what we like, Intelligentsia, L'Keep, these are some of
Yeah.
our favorite brands. On the clothing side and why we decided to get there, it was if we are going to enter this lifestyle world and we're going to go down this path, then what does that mean, right? Are we going to do a sunglasses collab, a hat, a bicycle, art? What does that mean for lifestyle? We believe that right now, every other cannabis brand and even alcohol companies, right? Like I saw Tito's merch the other day. Tito's is just throwing a logo onto a basic hat, basic keychain, basic items. No
Yeah.
one is really doing this. No one is creating an actual clothing line based around their brand. And so my first cousin, Zach, who's one of my best friends, he went to college with the owner of L'Keep. His name's also Alex. And so I first I met this guy, Alex, probably like 12, 14 years ago for the first time now. And he originally launched a brand called T Squad, and him and his wife, Katie, originally launched a brand called T Squad. It morphed into The Squad, and then it morphed into L'Keep. L'Keep is obviously French for the team. And so
The team.
Squad, team,
Yeah.
it's all been an evolution of the same brand. And now at this point in the last 12 months, I believe they've had Kanye West and Russell Westbrook and Black, the rapper, just posted on his new album wearing a L'Keep, Jake Paul. The last couple months, it's just been a exponential uplift in terms of celebrities and awareness to this brand. Jake and I reached out to them about a year and a half ago and decided that we wanted to start to build out a clothing line with them. And so the new website, when you go to binske.com, you have a THC section where you can enter the THC side, and then boom, you enter the lifestyle side. And so having L'Keep clothes on our website and e-commerce and in our boutique, having L'Keep inside of our Miami store, we actually think and thought it made a lot of sense to bring a well-respected high-end clothing line to the table and make it part of this. And last piece that I'll tell you, most apparel and clothing that's out there for cannabis is, like you said, very Grateful Dead-esque, right? It's very hippie-esque. It's big cannabis leaves on the hat or obnoxious stuff in your face that's like, hey, I smoke weed. What we've done with our art, and we originally had a pretty famous artist from the UK 7 years ago craft a series of 4 of these. I'll turn my screen for a little, but you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we had an artist from the UK make these for us years ago, and since then we've deconstructed individual elements and assets off of the collage, because these are technically all collages that he put together. And so these people are on Binske products and enjoying the higher life without having to show the bong in their hand, right? We're trying to show the expression of Binske through a different way. And so our L'Keep collaboration, the shirts, the pants, the socks, the bathing suits, they all have the Binske animals behind me and elements and assets coming to life through the clothing. And again, the idea is, I know what's good. I'm on the higher life, but I don't need you to know that I am wearing a shirt with a bong and a big cannabis.
What inspires you on this journey? Like, what are the people that in the past have sparked you to keep pushing down this? Because again, you guys are very much flying by the intelligent seat of your pants. You keep doing things that you want to do, that Jake wants to do and your business wants to do. But what pushed you to be that type of business leader? Because it feels different. And I mean this in a wonderful way. I mean, it's almost refreshing to hear you talk about the different things that you're doing with the enthusiasm that you talk about them with. Are there people that you looked up to that you saw doing this type of thing, maybe passively or actively, along this journey that pushed you to do this?
Yeah, there are. Is something that I love. And I think after the Binske ship has officially sailed, whenever that day comes, I'll always want to stay in some sort of brand building. I don't know if that means cannabis brand building, but the idea of just growing a brand is something that I really do love and enjoy. Back to infancy stages of this industry, being a true trailblazer and being in an industry that's never been done before, there are technically no mentors for me to go ask on how to do this, right? Because no one's done this before. At the same time, you can take comparisons from alcohol and all other industries, and I obviously have taken those comparisons and talked to those people. One of the main roles that I've been serving at this company has been CMO for the last couple of years. I've been running the marketing department. And one of our mutual best friends, Abe, is Greg Fass. And Greg was somebody that kind of helped me understand this idea of disruptive marketing and turning a bad situation into a good situation and trying to figure out ways to do something to have a video that goes viral or getting PR off something that you don't really deserve because you're not paying for that media content, right? But you're actually doing something that's disruptive and innovative in a unique way. And so when Greg and I started talking about this years ago, it's been something that stuck with me. And so, for example, our Instagram page got shut down years ago. And while most cannabis brands, when their page that's not good enough for me, and that we're going to go take a thought leader position in the space to understand why are these cannabis brands pages getting shut down. And all of a sudden, we ended up having interviews. We wrote a letter to Instagram. Bloomberg covered it. Adweek covered it. And we went and got a ton of PR about why our cannabis brands page is getting turned down. And it went from a negative situation into a really positive situation and positive.
What was happening with that?
In terms
like
of,
I can think of, off the top of my head, really inappropriate things that you can see on Instagram, right? I mean, indecent exposure. I mean, you can watch videos of people getting hurt really bad. I mean, the filter for what you can come in contact with seems broken. And maybe that's because there's so many millions of people on the platforms. It's hard to regulate. Maybe the AI isn't proficient at regulating it. So how is it that essentially porn can come through your Instagram, yet a legal cannabis ad can't? What are some of the challenges in marketing there? And what have you learned from reaching out and petitioning and actually having these discussions with high level social media employees?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting point that you brought up. Right now in the cannabis industry, the Instagram and social media is, as a whole, is a big issue. Cannabis brands are having a real trouble talking to their customers on the Instagram platform. Pages are getting shut down, stories are getting taken down, and on behalf of the cannabis industry, we don't know why that's happening, right? So let's talk about models for a second. And models is I'm talking about like a female model on Instagram in particular. They know that the line that they can't cross is their nipple. And so what do? They do left boob, right boob, cleavage, under boob. They put emojis over the nipple. They know where the line is and they straddle that line, right? And on behalf of the cannabis industry as a whole, we don't know what our cannabis nipple is. Is it hashtag 420? Is it pictures of buds? Is it talking about promotions at stores? Is it a disgruntled employee, right? Is it an employee that we terminated a couple months ago that's now just flagging the page and getting us in trouble? We don't know what is causing all of these pages to constantly get shut down. And on behalf of the cannabis people, we need to know what is our cannabis nipple so that we can straddle that line. Because I promise you, just like me and all my other colleagues in the industry, we would adhere to that. We would comply. We just don't know what is causing it. And I understand Instagram's rules and regulations were originally constructed, 10 plus years ago before legalization at this scale. But at this point, if Instagram wants to keep us on there and wants to not lose all of us, then we have to be able to update policies and guidelines of where we're at. TikTok is another massive issue right now that's going on with cannabis, and they constantly are taking stuff down. LinkedIn is a place that I actually do most of my work and have thought-provoking conversations and post a lot of the stuff that I'm working on because it can live there. But social networks as a whole in regards to cannabis is
something. Yeah, LinkedIn is
go ahead.
With the social media thing, I mean, just to I guess play devil's advocate here, right?
Yeah.
I could see why, because marijuana isn't legal in every single state and social media runs across state lines, it's hard to police that. So I feel like it would be much easier to just not allow any kind of cannabis marketing until it's completely legal on a federal level. Is that some of what you're hearing from them? Like that, obviously that doesn't solve the problem of, finding that fine line for nudity. But I could, that's got to be what they're saying, right? It's like, well, it's not legal on a federal level, so we don't want any of it on the platform.
Right, but there's some cannabis brands that even have the blue check mark, the verification badge. So Instagram is now verifying some cannabis companies as a legitimate company with a blue verification badge while kicking all these other people off. When you bring up the marketing piece, I'm not even saying let us pay for marketing. Let's do sponsored ads and let's do that. We just want to have even a private page, right? How websites have landing pages of are you 21 or plus before you get onto the page? Like, we would love to have a are you 21 or over landing page before you can see the content on the Binske page. And furthermore, if you're in Texas or you're in a state like Missouri, Alabama, or I guess Missouri just went, but some of these states that don't have a cannabis program, you can still go onto a cannabis company's website. You can still see visibility as to what's going on outside of your state. So I do think, yes, you're probably right. They're waiting for federal legalization, but newsflash is that Colorado and Washington went legal in 2012, 2013. It's now been 10 years and we still don't have federal legalization, right? It's been 10 years. How much longer are we going to go? And so I, yes, you're right. They were waiting for federal legalization, but we don't want to keep waiting for federal legalization. We want a platform to talk to our customers and fan
So,
base and communicate with.
so what's your, it's funny now looking, like talking about what we were mentioning in the beginning here is like you grow where the party without social media. You've also grown Binske with not without social media, but you've grown Binske with clear social media problems, right? You've had challenges and marketing hoops that you're having to jump through as business that other brands aren't facing if they're making like shoes or apparel or luggage or something like that. So it's kind of this thing that's been a theme within your career of like growing brands outside of that. Yet, if you look at any other company, social media is such an integral part of brand awareness because I would say, and I don't know any of the numbers on this stuff, but most people probably go through Instagram before they go through Google to look at a brand or a product.
Yeah.
Unless you know specifically what it is exactly that you're going to buy. So if I'm like, okay, I want this specific running shoe, then I'll go to Google because I want to find the best deal. But if I want Nikes, I'm not going to go to Nike.com. I'm going to go to Nike's Instagram page. And going back to the consumer engagement and experience, when you go to the page, you get a snapshot of the lifestyle. Nike goes, bam, this is who we are. This is what we're about. And so again, it's that opportunity to feed your product, to feed your brand, your lifestyle, and your feeling to someone that they might not get if they're going through a web page or a store. So do you see this as being this crazy hurdle that like must be jumped in the growth of Binske? Or how do you plan to handle that if this doesn't get resolved, if you guys are continually up against these problems on social platforms?
Lifestyle. So you will never see cannabis or cannabis products or dispensary talk ever again on the Binske page. We've now launched a second page called Binske_happenings, and that's where we talk about where Binske happenings are taking place from the retail level. We're running these promotions, we're launching these products, and so all of the THC stuff is now on Binske happenings, and all of the lifestyle stuff is on the legacy Binske page. This is what we feel like is our only choice at this point. We want to protect the integrity of the Binske page and the followers that we've built for this last 6.5, 7 years that we've amassed. And we've just decided to separate THC from lifestyle to avoid this continuing to come up because we don't see any other choice to do this. As a reminder on the THC side, THC can't cross state lines, right? So to run a multi-state cannabis brand like we are doing, you must regrow, reproduce, re-extract, resell, redistribute the products inside of every single territory. So Abe, you live in Encinitas area. When you go to your local dispensary, you walk into the shop there and all of those products on a dispensary shelf were produced inside of California. Same with Florida, same with Michigan, same with every single state. You know, if you and I, Abe, were starting a new business together today and we were going to make hats like the one you're wearing, we would have centralized production for our hats and we would distribute our hats all over. We don't.
Right.
That we're in, it's basically 6 different siloed businesses from one another. And now to manage that on social media, not to mention, you're now talking about Florida updates, Michigan, and you're trying to talk to different followers in different states while also trying to stay above the line and not getting in trouble with Instagram. And so the only real voice that we have, especially because we mentioned earlier, we're not in retail. We don't have the ability to talk to our customers coming into our stores because we sell wholesale to dispensaries all over the country. It's a difficult situation for us, and it's hard to navigate, and we're trying to do the best that we can, but it's quite difficult.
Is that a challenge that alcohol industry faces as well? Are they limited in what they can promote on social platforms?
They can't talk about health benefits, and there's a lot of ambiguity on what they can discuss in terms of this Bud Light will make you feel like this, right? That's where they can't. That's where they have to be careful, and they have to navigate some compliance issues around what they can and can't say in terms of our products will make you feel X. But if you think about it, Super Bowl commercials, right? Like they're able to market and advertise to the mass. to the masses. There's no issues in terms of
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. Alcohol companies, they are doing everything that they can to tell you that if you get drunk, you're gonna have a good time.
and you're going to be
Like, let's
that guy,
call
right?
a
They
spade
have
a spade.
beautiful
I mean,
girls around you. They make it seem that once you could pop this
yes,
bottle, your life is going to be enhanced. And so
right.
they also can put up billboards,
Which is so not true.
which is so not true. It's the opposite. We've all come to realize, since the days in Boulder when we were binge drinking, we've realized that this is a poison to the body. It's actually the complete opposite. Getting drunk is never the cool guy anymore. You look like an idiot every time. For cannabis right now, you need to prove that your audience is over 75% over the age of 21. So for the most part, most states, you don't see billboards, you don't see radio ads, and we're not able to do big scale advertising right now. Also, just think about this. When you go to the dispensary,
there's clear house.
And 20 kegs, and no one would say a word to us, right? How can we legally go buy 20 handles of vodka and 20 kegs? No one says a word to us, but then there's a legal limit to that.
To be honest, you're sitting in a race car with your foot almost on the gas pedal. I mean, if there's a position to be in, it seems that your position is the best one to be in, because you're doing all of this with a handicap, right? You are growing this brand, you're getting the partnerships done, you're doing all this stuff, and you're not even liberated with the normal advertising channels that a business has available. I mean, you're doing this all on a peg leg.
Yeah, we are. A lot of events, a lot of social media type of stuff that we can straddle that line. For example, in Miami, we just did this awesome event called Movies and Doobies, and we had a boat that was out on the water 200 feet out with a huge screen, and we played Wedding Crashers on 420 in Miami. We had a couple hundred people there. So we're actively doing things all over the country on a daily basis. We also do vendor days. So, when you walk into a liquor store and there's a rep there that says, "Hey, have you tried our new whiskey?" We now do that same concept inside dispensaries all over the country every single day. "Have you tried Binske? Have you heard of us? Grab some swag." And so we're doing everything that we can to continue to drive brand awareness. But the alcohol comparisons are just really interesting because they keep coming up, and everyone wants to compare us to alcohol, and there's obviously many things to compare, and then there's many things that it's like, how is this even a conversation right now?
I mean, it really is. I've always been fascinated by how dissimilar they are. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lives have been absolutely shattered by alcohol use, from alcoholism to drunk driving to accidents to abuse to domestic violence. I mean, show me a bigger culprit to problems in the world than alcohol.
Right.
You don't know many people that get high and then commit a heinous crime or smoke marijuana and then beat the shit out of their dog or something. It's just not, it's so uncommon. It's a more relaxing, chill thing. The fact that it's perceived this way, I mean, I'm sure you could probably go into the history of like why there's legalization issues around marijuana and the lobbying and not alcohol and everything. But the fact that we're in 2022 and there's still such hard lines in the sand against something that is so clearly not that bad for you.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind blowing.
So I told you earlier, I'm on a plane once or twice a week right now. Let's just think about the business trip that I go on, right? You walk through airport security, the only drug available, alcohol. You get onto your plane, the flight attendants, the only drug available, alcohol. You get to your hotel minibar, alcohol. Restaurant that night for dinner, alcohol. Alcohol has penetrated everything that we do as this perceived clean, healthy drug, or the drug of choice, right? I can't tell you how often I talk to people that tell me, "No, I don't do cannabis, I don't do drugs," but then they drink 3 martinis that night. Like, who are we kidding, right? Alcohol is a straight up poison to the body with no medical benefit whatsoever, and only harm, to your point. And cannabis now has a laundry list of medical benefits, not even mentioning CBD and the other cannabinoids in the plant. But cannabis is obviously a medicine for so many people. It's helped with so many illnesses, from PTSD to epilepsy to insomnia to stress, anxiety, and everything in between. And I am fully on your page in terms of the awareness to how bad really alcohol is and in comparing it. The other interesting thing to talk about that we were talking about offline before this podcast started was the potency issues, right? Right now in the cannabis industry, the
Yeah.
highest testing flower is selling for a premium. It sells faster and quicker than the lower testing stuff. But sometimes the lower testing stuff is a better product. So let's again compare to alcohol here. What's happening in the cannabis industry is the equivalent to Everclear selling for more money than Blue Label or 1942, right? We all know that Blue Label and 1942, for example, are a better finished quality product than, let's say, 151 grain alcohol Everclear. Even though Everclear grain alcohol is a higher alcohol content, the other products are better finished quality products. And right now in the cannabis industry, this is a massive issue that's tied to lack of consumer education and awareness of what's going on. But it's eye-opening for me to witness this every single day of the Everclear selling for more than the Blue Label in the 1942. And it's another perfect analogy that I think resonates with many people when you think about it like that.
And so you're saying that a product like Binske it's kind of like the 1942. It's the quality of ingredients, it's the finished product, it's the high-end top shelf of marijuana, and you guys are getting you're not getting beat out, but there's other products that are absolute trash that are selling at a premium.
Right. People are adding infusions into their joints, for example, where it's covered in distillate or key for additional hash of not quality product, but it jacks the number up. And right now, every single cannabis product, when you flip it over and you look at the testing label, because as a reminder, every product sold into a legal dispensary has to go through third-party testing that has the metrics on the data of the certificate of analysis of what's inside this product. And so there's a numerical value tied to every product, 26%, 32%. And while I'm okay with THC percentage being a factor, it can't be the factor. And right now in the industry, it is the factor. And so people don't know, and all they see is this number, and they say, with their $20 in their hand after a long day of work, how far can this $20 get me? How many milligrams, how high can I get with this $20, right? And so, yes, the quality of the product for some of these brands is not good quality, but it's like, it's brutal to watch. It's just not correct, and we assume the market will correct itself at some point.
So what do you want? What do you want to happen? Like, let's say Al has it his way. I walk into a dispensary tomorrow. What's different about my experience as a consumer?
So right now, there's a lot of misconceptions in the industry. For example, sativa indica is just completely bogus. Obviously, there's differences between sativa and indica,
Right.
but many people believe that sativa is equal to a line of cocaine and indica is equal to a Xanax, and that people actually think indica stands for in the couch. Like, people believe that. I know people that think indica stands for in the couch, and that sativa's I'm ready to go to a Tiesto concert, and that's just so far from the reality of the situation. There are properties tied.
Dude, who are these people?
Dude, that they only smoke indicas at night and they only smoke sativas in the morning. And the reality is, Abe, if you and I passed the sativa joint back and forth, or we had a group of friends around here, some may feel euphoric and have a nice little head high and feel a little energetic, and some people may be ready to take a nap. There is no uniform continuity of this product and this type of plant, sativa means this. And so these are the type of things that we need to do to help educate the consumer base. Terpene profile testing is something that is going to continue to come out. There are a ton of terpenes inside of cannabis plants, along with foods, right? Mangoes, strawberries, all of these different fruits in general and other herbs have all sorts of unique terpenes tied to them. And these cannabis varietals also do. And so what's going to happen over the next few years is terpene testing is going to become way more visible and readily available to consumers. So knowing what myrcene does for you, or limonene, there are a laundry list, again, of terpenes that are tied to each strain, and we are going to move towards terpene education and understanding how will these products make me feel, because that's actually what is making people feel the certain ways that they are.
See, that kind of stuff, I'm super on board for things like that because I've always felt I'm not the world's biggest marijuana consumer, but like the TV, I never know. I'm like, I don't know, put it in the bag, like I want to get out of here. But things that are actually listed as on the medical benefit side of this is actually what's happening on a physiological level, proven that stuff. I think you bridge the gap into more performance thing. Like the performance discussion is tough sometimes. I feel like for the marijuana industry to have
Yeah.
that bridges the gap because now you're talking about medical reasons why on a physiological level this is going to affect you in X, Y, or Z ways. Fact, not this is a clever marketing ploy by some cannabis company that we're going to put sleepy face and happy face on this one, and then that way people are going to understand that this is for partying and this one's for going to bed. Like, do away with all that shit and put it in a succinct, easy to understand way that actually gives the consumer an understanding of how it's going to affect them on a like cellular level.
Right.
So it's
not gonna
nice to hear that that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, it is. Not going to mention any names, but there was a vape company that had a shop on Abbot Kinney, and their whole thing was these moods. It told you how it's going to make you feel. And it's literally marketing 101. It's not correct because that's not uniform and that's not
Yeah,
how
it's just
everyone's
smoke
gonna...
up your
Well,
ass.
also,
Dude.
it's like going to buy liquor and walking in and seeing vodkas based on how the mood, euphoric, sleepy, and like who buys a drug like alcohol based on
Yeah.
an idea of a mood that it's going to create for you, right? Drunk is drunk. So
Yep.
this is something that will continue to come out, and you're right. We need to do it. The bottom line is that these cannabinoids, I believe there's over 145 of them now. CBD and THC are the ones that basically everyone listening to this will obviously know, but CBN, CBG, THCV, there are a bunch of other ones that are in the pipeline that are coming out. If you go into any California dispensary now, you can find products with CBN, CBG, CBD. They have a variety of different things like helping you with sleep and help, the industry is still in research phase. We're still trying to figure this all out, but we've realized that some of these cannabinoids are an appetite suppressant, so you won't get the munchies, which many people listening to this probably don't consume as much cannabis because they don't want the munchies, right? I hear that all the time. So
Right.
there will continue to be more updates with cannabinoids and the ratios at which they're deployed, a 5 to 2 to 1, a 10 to 3 to 1, and how they feel like this ratio based on testing will help with migraines, with PTSD, with menstrual cramps and period times, right? So as time goes on, these cannabinoidal ratios will continue to come out in development towards different medical benefits. And so now you are seeing edibles with a moon on them, and they're endorsing the idea of sleepy time edibles based on their cannabinoid ratio. And so this is just something else that is moving along and evolving as the industry unfolds.
Well, speaking of evolution within the industry, now I know specifically Binske is not playing the psychedelics game right now and no plans to immediately here in the future. But I know that you go to conferences, you're exposed to a lot of the information around psychedelics, around legalization, lobbying, and the legislation there. So can you tell me a little bit about what is the United States specifically looking at in terms of psychedelics, psilocybin, and legalization over the next, I don't know, 10-year period?
Yeah. So this is actually something that's really fascinating to me. Like you said, Binske is by no means getting involved in this. We have no plan to. We're not touching it at all. But I personally am very interested in the space. I've been following the space for a while. I've actually been low dose, microdosing psilocybin for over a year now, almost 2 years now. I think that psilocybin is a unbelievable drug, an unbelievable tool for us to use. Medicine, sorry, I said drug, an unbelievable medicine and tool for us. The funny thing is that it's always been classified in this group of illicit drugs that do, way more harm than, let's say, alcohol. But the reality is people are aware that
Again, false.
fungus, which, by the way, we're all made from fungal matter. We're sapiens, right? So we came from fungal matter. And so the fact that fungus and in particular psilocybin is making its stride back into a medical into the position of being as a true medical benefit in the way that it is as a medicine to so many, in psilocybin as a whole. As a reminder, for cannabis, decriminalization was the beginning of legalization. So as a cannabis executive and somebody that's been in the industry for a while, we do feel that medical mushrooms in particular, as well as ketamine, LSD, and a bunch of other drugs in the pipeline, will become medically available in the next few years. There is what's happening you have states like Oregon and Colorado that are starting to do decriminalization of these, and then you have federal legalization from the top level coming down. The question is the top going to come down before the bottom goes up, or where do they meet? And so funny enough, it looks like cannabis is going to end up being paving the landscape for psychedelics. They always said cannabis is a gateway drug, and it's funny to now think about cannabis paving the way for psychedelics.
The gateway legalizer.
Exactly. But it is fascinating, and it's something that, again, I'm really passionate about. I do think that psychedelics have the ability to maybe tap into SSRIs, right? SSRIs, I believe the last metric I saw were a $5 trillion industry last year. And that's Zoloft, Lexapro, and all these other companies. And there's a publicly traded psychedelic company by the name of Mayn Medicine. That's the Kevin O'Leary company. And their mission statement is to try to get psilocybin on a low dose scale into the hands of some of these patients that are currently on SSRIs, and getting them off of antidepressants and to use something that's not made in the synthetic lab. And then another cool story is Lamar Odom, the ex-NBA player, is becoming a colleague of mine, a friend of mine. We've been talking a lot recently, and he's about to release a story about his journey through ketamine. He was dealing with major mental depression and anxieties, and was borderline suicidal. And through ketamine and intensive ketamine usage and treatments, he has now turned the corner, and he's back onto a great track. He's healthy again, and he has used a substance that was always thought to be illicit and harmful and bad, like ketamine, to turn his life around. And that movie is actually, there was a documentary that was out. Now they're working on another movie, but Zappy, who's a friend of mine, is one of the drivers of ketamine right now in the entire world, and Lamar is his prodigy in terms of the advocate for mental health. And it's something that I'm also really passionate about, is mental health as a whole, and understanding how these drugs and medicines can actually benefit you.
I did an podcast episode with Julie Megler, who's she runs Sage Integrative Health up in Berkeley, and they do ketamine assisted therapy. And it was really interesting to hear how powerful some of the work that they're doing is, and some of the assistance that they're able to provide people that historically have been really left alone with their ailments of PTSD, depression, all this kind of stuff. And looking at ketamine, which, people wouldn't touch with a 30-foot pole. I mean, it had such a bad reputation. Now they're able to utilize it in a setting that provides true relief in the place of SSRIs and in the place of medication that was traditionally prescribed by a Western medicine doctor in a hospital. And it does really feel, it's funny you touched on the irony there of the gateway drug. Marijuana is the gateway legislation to bring all these things that should have been legal in the first place.
Right.
We're not saying that you should be able to walk into a 7-Eleven and get a shot of heroin. That's not what we're saying at all. But these medicinal and non-medicinal treatments that have been around forever, that are much safer than what's legally available in alcohol, are actually starting to become available. And on top of coming available, they're actually impacting people's lives positively in controlled settings. We're not saying bros going to the beach and doing ketamine together. In controlled medical settings with professionals, it's kind of exciting to think about what is going to happen over the next 10, 15 years as this stuff starts to roll out and follow a lot of the footsteps that you guys in the cannabis industry have pioneered. So that'll be cool to see.